Hey there, welcome to First Glance with Jody Vance. Very glad to have you along for this ride. And I mentioned ride because you're going to notice the cowboy hat over the shoulder of our next guest. Brad Docherty is the founder, chairman, president, and CEO, wearing all of those hats for Source Rock Royalties in Calgary, Alberta. Good to chat with you, Brad. Thanks for doing this.
Thanks very much for having me, Jody. Looking forward to it.
So many hats, as I mentioned. I want to get to know you a little bit and get to know SRR. SRR is the ticker symbol for your company, Source Rock Royalties. Tell us a little bit about Source Rock.
Yeah, so Source Rock is a pure play oil and gas royalty company, and we're actually the only junior oil and gas royalty company listed in Canada. We've been around for 10 years. We were private for 9 years, building the business, and then we listed in March 2022 on the venture exchange. And we did a full IPO prospectus at that time, and we've been kind of continuing with the same balanced growth and yield business model since that time, and looking to maintain exclusive focus on acquiring royalty interests only in Western Canada.
So can you explain that? Like, what's the difference between investing in an oil and gas royalty company versus investing in an oil and gas explorer or producer?
Yeah, so all of our royalty interests are what's called interests in land, and we're attached to the particular mineral interests that are getting developed. But we don't incur any of the costs to develop the lands. So we acquire our royalty interest on day one, and that is our entire capital cost associated with owning that royalty interest. As the lands are developed by the explorer and producers, we benefit from that activity, but we do not have to pay for any of that activity on an ongoing basis. And we also do not have any future liabilities associated with the wells on those lands. We just have our royalty interest, and we benefit from the production extracted from those lands over time.
Wow. Okay. So my novice is like, I'm a little bit mind blown. I don't think I've ever heard it explained that way. And it sounds so fascinating. And with the risk that any investment might be, you just tagged a couple of things there that reduce the risk a little bit for somebody who's looking for a place to put their money. How has the obvious just upheaval, if you will, about the oil and gas industry impacted what you do when we're looking at the war in Ukraine and the struggles with Russia and the need for a more I struggle for the correct word because I don't want to use nationalist, but sort of a North American or even just a Canadian. How important is it to invest locally, I guess is what I'm saying, in terms of what you bring to the table?
Yeah, so obviously the oil and gas industry has been volatile for decades, and we've kind of seen that in the decade of our existence, the volatility up and down, and always maintained that exclusive focus on Western Canada. Primarily, that it allows us to really kind of navigate the ups and downs, and not only are we kind of in close proximity to where the product we're receiving is coming from, and we can be in touch with the market dynamics for that region, but it
Right.
also allows us to ensure that we have good working relationships with our counterparty partners. And so our operators of our lands are really partners for us in that we receive our product from them. They're the ones developing the lands and in control of the lands, and so having close ties to the region they're in, and even having personal relationships with a lot of our operators, it really allows us to kind of have that comfort in the assets that we're owning royalty interests in.
A lot of people are looking for that in their portfolio. There's no doubt about that. SRR is the ticker that we're talking about. Again, Brad Docherty is the founder, chairman, president, and CEO of Source Rock Royalties. Now, your company went public on the TSX Venture in 2022?
Correct. Yeah. First day of March, 2022.
All right. Well, here we are. A year. How's the
Just
year
past a
been?
year.
And what are some of the lessons learned and successes that you've enjoyed over this past year?
Yeah, so obviously 9 years of being private, being public for the last year has been obviously different, and we found ourselves post IPO all of a sudden in another unique oil and gas environment, and obviously raised the money in kind of a more tepid oil price environment, and then saw oil kind of go to the moon, so to speak, last summer on the back of the Ukraine war, unfortunately breaking out. And so we really kind of stuck to our kind of mandate of being prudent and disciplined with our acquisition strategy. And we've had an oil focus for our entire existence. We're 90% plus oil in our production portfolio. And we obviously continued to want to be pursuing acquisitions, but obviously found ourselves in this high price environment that made acquisitions much more expensive than we'd anticipated when we were completing the IPO. So we were quite disciplined and kind of held on to most of our capital through the $100 plus oil environment we saw last year. And so really kind of again learned that patience kind of pays off at times, and that you can't force growth at all costs. You have to kind of adapt to the market as it comes to you. And we did eventually execute on a nice little deal in Q4 last year as oil prices had come off from the summer highs. And again, we kind of continue to look at our business model as being a prudent and disciplined way of getting exposure to oil and gas. And we've learned that over the years that can pay off over time. And we've continued to be focused on paying our dividend, which we've paid for a long time, and making sure that we're executing on acquisitions on the right metrics and with the right counterparties, and again, not kind of letting the market dictate our activities.
SourceRockRoyalties.com is where you can find out more investment information and investor info. I want to ask you, because you did bring up how the market shifts and change. We spoke about the war in Ukraine and the pressures that are put on this lane due to what is unfolding there. But also, I'd be remiss if I didn't reference how the change is evolving with regard to oil and gas and the reputation of oil and gas for some, in terms of wanting a more green economy, and then the realities of the fact that there's no way to flip a switch and change everything overnight, and having to, address that with investors. How does Source Rock Royalties come at the questions around climate and oil and gas?
Yeah, I mean, I think I really believe that, the term transition is kind of falsely used in the sense that, we're really more in a diversification process of energy sources. And, from what I see day to day and talking to, companies and kind of representatives on the ground in Calgary, is that, the oil and gas industry in Western Canada is really leading a lot of that kind of work that's being done to create kind of a greener fossil fuel or a greener energy market. And so, I think that the oil and gas industry and fossil fuels are going to be needed for a long time. And a transition is again a kind of I think a wrongly or misguided used term, in that, we need to be diversifying. And I think that there needs to be recognition that the players in the oil and gas industry, especially in Western Canada, are kind of the leaders and the drivers behind kind of helping facilitate that diversification process that is and should be happening.
Very learned answer there. I appreciate you fielding that question, because I know people think about that, and as opposed to looking at it as a transition, flip a switch, but more about diversifying, because clearly in our lifetime it would be next to impossible to transition away from what has fueled the planet for so long. So a very good answer to a complex question there, Brad. I appreciate you taking that. Source Rock Royalties, again, SRR is the TSX Venture Exchange stock symbol. Tell me about you and your team. Like, what's your background?
Yeah, so I was a corporate lawyer by background, and ultimately through my practice kind of got exposure to a lot of entrepreneurial ventures and startup companies, and kind of really developed an entrepreneurial itch through that kind of profession. And so I kind of transitioned from law to Source Rock quite abruptly, just in that I was kind of looking to start an oil and gas company, being obviously intrigued by it on the ground in Calgary, and really kind of felt that a royalty company best suited my skill set and my view of what starting a business looks like. And ultimately for me, a royalty business is something that is kind of always sustainable and can be scaled in a constantly kind of profitable way.
Yeah.
We've never had a quarter that wasn't cash flow positive in the history of the company, and that's a characteristic of the business model that's important to me. A lot of times over the years, startup oil and gas explorers and producers are somewhat binary, in the sense that they have an idea, they have a strategy, it works or it doesn't work, and there's success or failure. And to me,
Right.
it was really more about starting a business that had, scalability and sustainability, that could be cash flow positive from kind of day one, so to speak. and really kind of be built in a prudent way. And that really is kind of the way my mind works with entrepreneurialism, is that, it should be something that has, kind of control parameters around it, and that, it's not success or failure. It's ultimately something that can be managed and grown in a disciplined fashion. And after 10 years, I am still the only full-time employee in the business. And so, we have a small team. We have a CFO that works with us as well, and kind of helps facilitate, the financial reporting side of the business. And then we have a team of independent directors, oil and gas professionals, geologists, engineer, landmen, and they really kind of help facilitate the technical evaluation of our acquisitions. And they also kind of bring a lot of breadth of relationships to our business. And the relationship side is important because we do really focus on finding our own acquisition opportunities, as opposed to going and bidding on assets that are for sale through marketed processes.
Small but mighty, only full-time employee, wearing the white hat. Clearly, it's right behind you. And 12.8 million in Canadian dollars in dividends paid between 2014 and 2022. That cash flow factoid that you just threw out is pretty impressive as well.
Yeah, so we started paying a 1.5 cent per share quarterly dividend in Q1 of 2014. And we paid that dividend quarterly for 25 consecutive quarters prior to COVID. We then paused the dividend entirely during COVID, and then came out of that and started paying the dividend again, and have paid it since that time. And so, we've paid that dividend now for 34 of 36 quarters over the last 9 years. As you referenced, 12.8 million in dividends paid back to date. And, it continues to be a core component of our business model. And, we don't want to be an all growth or an all yield business. We are trying to achieve that balanced growth and yield business model, and think that it's important through the cycles in the oil and gas industry to be returning capital to shareholders through dividends.
Well, if people want to get in touch with you, Brad, where do they go, and how do they get all the information they need to be a part of what you're building there?
Yeah, so as you referenced earlier, our website is www.sourcerockroyalties.com, and there's direct contact information for myself on the website. Obviously, we have a kind of fulsome corporate presentation on there, but always happy to answer questions. And I think we are a bit of a unique business model, being the only junior oil and gas royalty company in Canada. And so, I think our key characteristics for people to kind of take out of this conversation is that we're a high cash flow business. We're a high yield in the market, but a very sustainable yield, being an 8.3% yield currently. We have very high net back per barrel, which is kind of our profit per barrel on our production. And we're really kind of positioned to grow the business with the cash balance that we're sitting on still from the IPO. So we have about 29 cents per share in cash currently, and we're looking to deploy that on new acquisitions and scale not only our royalty production, but our exposure to ongoing drilling activity on our royalty lands.
Great. Well, I have a feeling we'll be talking again with that kind of a future glimpse that you just gave us there, Brad. Thanks for taking some time out for First Glance.
I appreciate it. Thanks very much for having me.
Just going to reiterate one more time, SRR on the TSX, Brad Doherty, founder, chairman, president, CEO, based in Calgary, Alberta. SourceRockRoyalties.com is where you get all that extra added information and contact information. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, Jody.